Are you a technician who wants to set yourself apart? Then the Trusted Technician podcast is for you. I'm Derek Hoferter, coach and trainer at SBE. And on this podcast, we will have experienced HVAC coaches and trainers, as well as top performing technicians, all sharing their tips and strategies to help you be more successful. Welcome to the Trusted Technician podcast. This is Coach Derek. And in this episode, I'm having a conversation with Cory Holman. Cory has been on this podcast before. You can check out those episodes where he's spoken about trust and goal setting. Cory is one of the co-owners of George Brazil. And in this episode, Cory is going to talk about sales, specifically the current challenges that need to be overcome and how actually understanding what consultative selling and how to close can help you overcome those challenges. All right, Cory, if we could kind of start out with just sharing a little bit of your thoughts on what are the challenges currently comfort consultants, those who their function is just to sell HVAC systems, face right now.
I think the biggest challenge that I'm seeing right now is really what's happened with pricing in the industry. I mean, in the last year, I think we're used to pricing going up $500, maybe $1,000 in a high year, where the last year prices have gone up $3,000, $4,000, sometimes $5,000 per cost per system. So there's a couple of challenges that come with that. One is kind of your own limiting beliefs. Some comfort advisors don't have issues with that. So that's been a big challenge that we've had to deal with. And as a team, we've had to spend some time reading some books to overcome some of those challenges. Okay. And then how do we take the things that we've learned from that and put it into our process? That's been some good stuff that we've learned this just over the last few months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The other big thing is we're fast to react to pricing and changing our pricing, but a lot of times that competitor's not. Now, if you're not able to be confident and sell at high margins, at high dollar amounts and be able to deliver to the customer the value, when now the difference between you and maybe a business owner who hasn't made any price adjustments, and now instead of there being a $1,000 to $2,000 difference, there's a $4,000 to $5,000, $6,000 price difference. So, understanding how to have the confidence to build that value for a customer, we've spent a lot of time working on that this year.
So what is it then? Because this is a very common thing, that I'm hearing about the pricing, like a lot of fears or uncertainties around that. So what do you do? What is it that you teach someone who has to go out there and maybe sell at a price point that they already know is going to be way higher than their competitors?
Yeah, the biggest thing is helping them understand what it takes to deliver. Anybody can go out there and make a bunch of promises on the front end. Okay. What does it take to deliver those promises over the next 10 or 15 years? What does that company look like? So it's easy to go out to a customer and ask the question, what are you looking for? Well, I'm looking for somebody that I can trust. Okay. Well, tell me, what does that look like? How do you see that trust over the next 15 years? And how do you expect me to deliver that trust? I expect efficiency. I want to say, well, how do you see that happening? And what does the company, your partner, look like that's going to do that work? So we've really had to change and get a lot deeper with our questioning, in the sales process, which is differentiating, which changes the conversation. So we've had to spend a lot of time focused on that. We were talking about that this morning. Literally, these are the notes from my morning sales training with the sales guys. You see if this makes sense. What is important? So this is the question that we wrote up on the board to make sure that we added this to our process this morning. What is it most important to you when working with the contractor on a project like this? So as we ask that question and we list those things out, well, explain to me what trust looks like. I get that you're saying trust, but I need to understand what trust looks like to you and have the customer explain that. I need to understand that saving money is important to you. Well, what does that look like so that I can make sure that we're delivering and talking about it? So it's That may not seem like much, but it's how you're overcoming or eliminating this problem before you bring up price. I don't know, Derek, if that answers.
No, that's great. I'm sure that those are different questions. And if the homeowner is going the route of feeling like they need multiple estimates or bids or to do the research, is probably a different question than they've been asked by someone else coming out there.
That's literally what the feedback I'm getting is that as we're doing this, the customer's like, well, nobody's asked me a question like that. And when you can get a customer to say, nobody's asked me that before, they're stepping over what I call a trust line, meaning they're trusting you and they're getting closer to wanting to do business with you. So those are things that we're trying to make sure that our process is delivering.
So, Cory, you're going to be teaching a 2-day sales class coming up in September, specifically for Comfort Consultants. Can you kind of give an idea of, in 2 days, what is it that could be covered? What can someone expect to learn in those 2 days?
In the 2 days, we're going to go through, everything that we've been learning in our sales process. So from start to finish, from the moment we pick up the phone and we call that customer, how do we create movement towards sold? So most of the people that we're talking to here are familiar with the pendulum. How do we get movement towards sold, and how do we stay out of that way of that movement and keep things moving? That's and it's different in every home. So it's hard to say, I'm going to give you a really strong structure, a sales structure of what are the key things that you need to follow to be successful. And then off of that structure, we're definitely going to talk about the different situations and the different tools that you need to be successful. But you're going to come out of that 2 days with a very solid step-by-step structure that I need to make sure happens that will lead that customer to wanting to do business with you. We've done enough to eliminate and overcome, a lot of the challenges that we face, but also even more importantly, build the trust and the value that's going to get the customer to want to spend that extra $4,000, $5,000 that you're going to have between you and a competitor.
You feel like that's one of the biggest mistakes that a salesperson makes, is just being unstructured in general, where they think it's more about like their charisma or the right words or some magnetic component of their being versus it's actually a process?
There's no doubt about it. And it was said very well this morning, whether you're being sold as a customer or you're selling, there are a bunch of things that we do that trigger reactions. And if you are following a traditional sales process, you're going to trigger a bunch of reactions and sayings that people will say automatically that they're not even aware that they're saying, and you're going to walk out of there with nothing. Okay. And until you realize that that's happening and you put a process in place that blows that up, okay, you're not going to have real conversations with customers. And there's enough salespeople that have enough experience out there to know that they've run plenty of calls where this sales call never went anywhere. All I did was present. And so we're going to really dive into that.
Can we talk a little bit about tools available to a salesperson, and specifically something like an assessment? The one that we utilize and we're familiar with is the OMG, the Objective Management Group Assessment. How does a salesperson use that to actually make it useful for them?
I think I'll share the story because I kind of love this story, but the first time I had Will Smith, a lot of you guys are familiar with Will Smith and SB, take that assessment, and I showed him it. He's like, this thing's so wrong. I don't believe this. This is not me. And then, once he kind of really looked in the mirror and realized that, oh my word, this thing is nailed me. It's dead on. I think that's the reason I use objective management, the OMG assessment, is I've used it for now probably close to 20 years, and I have read thousands of them at this point. And I trust its accuracy, but it does a great job of somebody who's willing to and is looking to learn and improve themselves. I don't think there's a better tool out there. And that's the purpose of that assessment, is it gives me a great view of me an unbiased view of me into how I can work on those core competencies of a great salesman, where I need to go to work on and improve. And how can that not be a win?
And since you've looked at so many, and you're constantly looking at those, what's like the typical gap that most salespeople realize about themselves when they first take the OMG and then they get the results back?
A couple of the biggest things that I see is, one is they don't understand consultative selling, what selling really is. A consultative selling is, if we look at that competency, it says that we need to ask questions, we need to uncover issues, and then we need to talk about solutions. Okay. And most people will say, well, that's what I do. Okay. Well, that's not really what we do. What we do is we ask some questions. And as soon as a customer gives an answer that we like, that leads to something that we can talk about, we quit listening and we start talking about, we go into our sales process about what we think is important. And we stop. The reality is we really stop listening at that point. It happened this morning on a role play with a new guy here. I asked him a question. I said in that role play, I said, man, I really like you. His name's Riley. Riley, I like you. You're a great salesman, but man, you are way higher than any of your other competitors. And he immediately went into telling me why, about how great they are, the service we do, how we're going to take care of you for the next 15 years. And he instantly went into defending that rather than listening to what I was saying and say, well, is that a concern to you? You probably knew that when you called us. Is that something we need to deal with? Tell me why you think we're more expensive. And it's just a completely different approach. So that's a huge one. Okay. That guys just really don't understand consultative selling. The next one that I probably see the most is understanding closing. They don't understand what a great closer is. And our industry's done a terrible job of that. We actually teach, give a price. That's going to flush out your objections. They're going to tell you it costs too much. They need to think it over. They're going to go into a bunch of stuff. Okay. And now we're going to teach you how to overcome those objections. Well, that's a poor sales process. And we're going to give you some magic lines of how to overcome these objections. Closing is the results of a great process. And so that's why I focus so much on, let's develop a process that deals with all of these objections so that when we talk about when we're going to install this thing and what it costs, we've already eliminated all of those objections, or we've done our best to eliminate those. And that's the result of a great process.
That's great. It's just a kind of a final thought, Cory, for anyone listening to this. It's hot out. We're getting into the season. This is where a lot of the opportunity is. What maybe 1-2 things should someone be focusing on right now just to try to optimize their opportunities that they have in front of them?
Slow down. Slow down. Don't let anybody get you to abandon your process. Great salespeople do not abandon their process. That doesn't mean I'm doing a presentation. Okay. That means that I have a process that I'm going to make sure this customer understands this, and I'm going to make sure they trust me. A phrase I write up on the board 3 or 4 times a week. If they can't trust you, you can't teach them. And that takes time. That takes time for you to figure out what it is that you need to do to get them to trust you and move closer so that you can teach them. And that doesn't mean as soon as they cross one of those trust lines that you can jump right into what it's going to cost and when we're going to install it. There might be multiple levels of trust that I've got to get that customer to come over to before I can do business with them, or before they want to do business with that. And that takes time, and it takes a process that you have, that you're following, that you're checking and saying, okay, we're getting closer and closer.
That's so good. Cory, thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank you for listening to the Trusted Technician Podcast. If you would like to learn more about SBE, you can find us online at sbeodyssey.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, we would appreciate it if you would leave us a review. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.